Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending where you are at the moment in the world. A very warm welcome from UIN and UCityLab project today at the final event. My name is Baljana Razbaeva. I'm a manager strategic initiatives at UIN, and I'm here today with a great pleasure to moderate an event on UCityLab project that is about addressing how exactly we can solve urban challenges through collaboration between universities with societal stakeholders. And specifically today, we are going to touch upon the topic of challenge-based education. Today, I have with me our wonderful partners, the main contributors, in fact, who made this project possible and come to life. I have Todd Davey with me from IMTBS, Rui Coutinho from Porto Business School. I have here also Konstantinos Korkautas from Autonomous University of Barcelona. I have Sarah Arco from University of Ljubljana and our very own Alexandra Zinovieva from UIN. And today we are going to discuss different things really about urban challenges and UCityLab project. Before Rui will open the session with a warm welcome, we will also then afterwards touch upon the urban challenge framework and look at how exactly this challenge framework is going to be applied in your context, but also have been already applied in two institutions presented by Todd Davey and Konstantinos Korkatas. And then Sarah is going to walk us through the UCityLab teaching toolkit, which is also one of the main outcomes from the project. And we will wrap it off with a brief presentation on several case studies here from the Netherlands by Alexandra, and I will quickly also share my own experiences with challenge-based education. And without further ado, welcome again, everyone. And Rui, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Good morning or good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this session. I'm delighted to say a few words here on behalf of Porto Business School, the coordinator of this UCityLab project. It's great to be here again with our partners. And I think it's very timely, this session, for two main reasons. And by the way, the reasons that at the beginning of this project, and we had this idea, and when all the partners started co-creating this proposal, of course, none of this were on our minds at that moment, even though the issues were very pressing. It's very timely because right now we are all into pedagogical innovation. We are all trying to figure out how to deliver great education from a distance, how to engage with our students' attention, get them on board, even if they haven't been in campus for a year in some cases. We might have students today that just started in our universities and never landed a foot in our campus. So what about identification? What about a sense of belonging? What about the social dimension, the social experience of learning? So challenge-based projects at education level becomes such a powerful pedagogical tool that can be leveraged and can be used at this moment, really to bring our students together. Because even if working from remotely, even if by any chance they haven't ever seen the right color of each other's eyes, there's actually such a powerful sense of community, of engaging, of networking with challenge-based projects. Hands-on learning, you know, the second best way of learning is doing. The first is actually teaching. So by doing things, really, we can try to bring our students together, try to get them to feel closer to each other, closer to their alma maters, closer to the professors, and so on and so on. So on that sense, it's very timely. It's also very timely because at the center of the reconstruction, the recovery of the European Union, the Commission resisted passionately, and they kept this sustainability issues, the societal issues, at the center of the recovery plan. And when I say they resisted, because there were, some pressure. We all remember, most likely at the beginning of the pandemic, that some countries were already asking for a postponement of the recovery agenda based on the so-called European Green Deal, the European Ecological Pact. But by putting green and digital as two main pillars for the recovery, the Commission is actually signaling the importance of sustainable development, intelligent growth, to be at the center of this recovery. And this is also very timely, because that's exactly what we're trying to address with UCityLab. Societal issues that are felt every day by ordinary people in the cities all over Europe. And cities here act as laboratories, as test beds for innovation. Actually, cities are most likely one of the most powerful engines of innovation that we have, I would say, all over the world. You can feel and you can address almost every single issue, from very mundane things like mobility or logistics, supply chain for food, etc., to more complex issues like aging well, loneliness in elderly people. And so by trying to address these societal issues that focus on sustainable development, on intelligent growth, that most likely, because our students are filled with explosive energy, they were already focusing on digital solutions, or at least leveraging digital to address the societal challenges. We are, I would say, at the very center of the recovery plan. So from a pedagogical point of view and from a societal point of view, this session is very timely. And I know that what my colleagues have to present to everyone are indeed great tools that we think can be used to address the issues, to bring the students together, to enhance the pedagogical methodologies that we use, so that we bring learning by doing methodologies to the core of our programs, but that we do it with real situations, in real contexts, providing this sense of impact for the students. The idea that they are learning by doing things that solve real people's needs and problems, but by trying to bring creative solutions, some more complex, other more simple. But also, I think, and I will wrap it up now, I think that it is indeed very powerful for something that the European Union really needs at this moment. And I would say most likely it's the most important moment for the Union in this past 50 years. It's responsible, engaging citizens. And that's what we're dealing with. It's by nurturing this responsible and engaging citizens that at this moment are our students, that are at their university levels, but that they will be the future leaders of the European Union. And I think this is our modest contribution. So thank you all. I wish you a great session, and let's kick off.
Thank you very much, Rui. I couldn't agree more. It couldn't be more timely and more relevant than ever today to actually talk about these topics, both in terms of innovating education, but also educating and generating this new society of responsible citizens, which I think is a very excellent segue for us now to tap into exactly what has happened as part of the project. And I would like to invite Todd Davey, who is an associate professor at Institute Min Telecom Business School, and Konstantinos Korkatas, who is the coordinator of Core Smart Sustainable Cities at the Autonomous University of Barcelona, to tell us more about the Urban Challenge framework and really walk us through on how can we organize challenge projects at our universities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Baljan. Really looking forward to presenting to everybody today some of the activities that have gone on in the project, but as much as anything, we also want to bring together and to present a couple of frameworks that were really useful during the project. I'll be presenting first, and then Konstantinos will be coming in after that with an example from UAB. But what we wanted to start off with was just an introduction to urban challenges and introduction to the framework which underpins urban challenges, and to talk a little bit about what makes an urban challenge. Then we will go into the examples, so my own example, and then also then Konstantinos's, and then we'll finish off with some lessons learned. So the first question is, what is a challenge project? We have looked at it in multiple ways, and I guess what we've come to the conclusion, or the conclusion that we've come to, is effectively that we are having as the centerpiece students. Now we've put it in brackets, students, and there's obviously a range of different people that can fit under that title. So it could be bachelor students, master, PhD, academics even, those from industry or societal actors who are participating in an activity in which they act as consultants to solve city issues. The city or region, or even perhaps the nation, can act as the client in this respect. And then the citizens of that city, region or nation are what we call the beneficiaries or the users. The final element is that the challenge project is run as a program by the university. Now that could be extracurricular, or it could also be within the curricula, either way. And that's the framework from which we were launching our challenge projects. And this gives, I think, a really clear definition of what is a challenge project and who's involved in the challenge project. For many of you, you would know the experience of a hackathon, which is usually a very time-dependent, intense activity of providing a solution to a given problem. So how is an urban challenge project different to a hackathon? Well, effectively, it has a very strong focus on a social purpose, but also in involvement. So that brings into the equation whether it's those living in the society or those experiencing the problem, but also could, for example, be governmental actors or regional agencies, for example. It has a people orientation, so not necessarily a financial orientation, but in fact focused on the end user and how they experience the problem and how they can be facilitated to solve the problem. The other element that I think is a bit different to a hackathon, because most hackathons are usually run in a 1, 2 or 3 day format, is that there is some flexibility to the course or the situation, so it can be run over different time periods. It should involve technology, and generally speaking, it also involves some sort of creation of a prototype solution. The potential clients, let's just elaborate a little bit on that. So it could be urban centres, municipalities, cities, regions. I did mention national governments as well. But then it also could involve industry actors. It can involve intermediaries, so those that are working between university and industry. It can involve associations as well as urban development organisations. And in an ideal scenario, you would have all of those actors involved that are relevant to the problem that you're facing. Speaking of the problem, a city problem issue, it should address some sort of social or sustainability issue for which the public bodies are responsible, and that the relevant issue should be something like a circular economy, mobility, digital skills. We'll come to the Sustainable Development Goals in a second, which give us a really holistic framework of different issues. What has to be done within these projects? Well, students are, again, in inverted commas, are undertaking secondary or primary research, or both, potentially, to investigate the issue, to really dive into the problem and understand the nature of that problem. They are then determining and evaluating possible solutions. So that is very much an ideation activity, but then a refinement of those solutions and bringing them into reality through a pitch or a report of some description. And I mentioned earlier also a prototype. So ideally there would be some sort of prototype, or maybe you call it a prototype, because it's earlier in its development, of the final solution. What are some of the elements of a challenge project? And this is this part of the presentation was this is something that we have put together as part of the project, and Konstantinos and myself have been identifying these specific elements and breaking them down to facilitate the organisation of these challenge projects. So let's have a look at some of these basic elements. The first being that student teams are solving problems, and there's a specific project process. So the first being, the first part of that process is a problem exploration and definition. So what are we actually focused on? But then really diving into some research, mentioned earlier, primary or secondary research, in order to really frame the problem. And I think a quote from Albert Einstein really captures the nature of the need to really focus on the problem and understand it, in his quote saying that if I had a problem to solve, then I'd spend 95% of the time on understanding the problem and 5% on the solution, because the solution becomes obvious. So we really emphasize the focus on the problem, but then obviously solution identification and coming up with a range of different options of how that problem could be solved. And then we have that pitch or report. It's supported by, and this is where for many of you, you will notice this is a little different to how most educational programs are organised, because in this program, or in this in a challenge project, the supporting elements are in fact the seminars, the masterclasses, the workshops. There might be site visits, the working with mentors. We also strongly advise, especially at the moment, an online system that provides support, as well as a series of tools. For most educational programs, they are the core of the program. Whereas in a challenge project, you have the project as the core of the project, the keystone running through the entire pedagogy, the entire educational program. But then you are supporting it with a range of other activities, which, as you can see there, are designed to support and facilitate the student in that problem-solving activity. So as an example, it might be that you, in terms of the problem definition, you might have a seminar specifically dedicated to what is a problem and the nature of problems, but then you might follow it up with a workshop about actually going into the problem, trying to explore what is the problem, identify the problem and bring it onto a problem canvas, and then to explore that specific problem in your teams, to actually present that in the class. That's just as an example. To make it even more special, perhaps, so if you really wanted to make the program something that is really iconic, what we have experienced is that having a launch event can be really productive. Having these a number of events throughout the program can be promoted, for example, externally as well as internally, in order to get not only press but also to get those experiencing the problem or those who could potentially solve the problem to come into the program. So a launch event, then a problem or framing event, then a solution seeking event, and then at the end a pitch event, and that could be a gala event or it could even be a pitch at the partner location. So that's just to make the challenge project effectively a larger event, if you like, or something that is more promotable and serves the needs of some of the other the partners that are involved, for example. What we also believe really strongly, and we've tested this within the UCityLab project, is that it has the flexibility. So this challenge project structure has the flexibility to suit a 2-day event, intensive event, but it can also fit in a semester long summer school, or it could be curricular bound or extracurricular. And I think that flexibility is really important if we're going to bring it into a university context, because you need to be able to bring it in within your existing programs or as a supplementary element outside the program. The way in which we ensure the flexibility of the program is, and that we can fit it to any length of program or any nature of program, is a concept that Konstantinos and UAB were really essential in actually creating this approach. And I thought it was a really unique insight into how you can structure your problem, I guess your problem definition, in order to be able to address it for any particular program that you need. And basically what we have is a structure which is at a very micro level, where we're focusing on projects. As we get closer to a macro level, we're focusing more on programs. But then if we really want to go at a macro level, so a regional level, we are focusing at a strategic level. And there's a couple of examples, as you can see there: industrial heritage reuse, new urban public spaces, and then a renewed concept for the neighbourhood. And what that means is that you can have a 2-day sprint focus on a very micro part of the problem, but then you can also have a semester long or summer school which is focused on a more macro level. Just to give it a little bit more depth, or just to give you a bit more of an understanding, the example here is a District of Innovation, Knowledge and Culture, and the question that we have posed here is just an example, but what are the necessary steps to transform, in this case it's Evry Corcoran, a city into a thriving and prosperous city. And breaking it down, so that's the overarching question, but then breaking it down into that, I call it the meso level, so you have the policies and governance, and then you might have something like urban intervention, and then you break it down again into micro level problems. So for example, the redesign of the use of public space can be linking sectors of the city through pathways, highlighting the architectural assets for whatever, but in that way, what you have is you have these macro level, meso level, and micro level problem definitions. And by doing so, then you can, depending on your program, you can focus on any one of these levels in order to be able to find a problem that's solvable within the time frame that you have and within the resources that you have. Two final elements in the framework for a challenge project. The first one is the double diamond method, and this is something that the project really strongly embraced. And it basically involves going through an inductive, deductive, then inductive and deductive phase. So an inductive phase being expansive. So in other words, building on the ideas of others, as many ideas as possible, and really freedom of thought. The deductive is once you've got a body of ideas or potential problems that you've identified, you're then refining them and defining them and making it really sharp and reducing that into something that is usable. But basically the way in which the double diamond method works is it takes you through this inductive phase, expansive, to reductionist, really defining, inductive again, and then deductive, going through problem and then solution. So in other words, you've got inductive and deductive as part of the problem part of the equation, and then inductive and deductive as part of the solution part of the equation. And what that enables you to do is have a really clear focus for the participants, the students, as to how they should be approaching that part of the project, because too often what we see is that the students tend to get very critical of their potential solutions very quickly, and that eliminates, or I guess decreases, the potential for the creation of solutions. It limits the overall potential to come up with the right solution. So really important to keep them in that phase of saying, well, we need to stay inductive, we need to stay expansive. So I think that has been a really useful model. The second model that well, I guess it's a framework that many of you will be aware of, is the problem sourcing and alignment with the Sustainable Development Goals from that have been defined and explained in 17 different elements. I won't go into those today, but I think that's something that you can be looking into yourself in order to get further information. So just to bring it into a quick example, now I'm going to go through this quite quickly because I think the framework was probably the most important part to cover. This is the project that we did at IMTBS, which is in the south of France. It was called the Urban Challenge, and we had the challenge and we partnered together with the city of Évry-Courcouronnes. How can Évry-Courcouronnes be better promoted or positioned as a livable or desirable city? Now, this project was given to a group of students who are entrepreneurship students, which I'll explain in a second. But basically, we had a range of different themes. We had city architecture, we had parkour, because the city is the home of parkour, street art, cultural assets, city park design, as well as this concept of student city. So there were a number of different themes that we had. We had a very clear project plan, which involved a clear definition of the supporting elements that we mentioned, so the workshops or the seminars, a really clear understanding of where we were in the process, so the problem, and then moving into the solution. Very clear description of the detail at each of those different stages. We defined really clearly the deliverables that the students had to provide through that process. And then working from right at the start of the project, I guess, all the way through to the final pitch. We had 4 mentors who were supporting them through the process. So they were either providing some information in the masterclasses or supporting them with their solutions, providing feedback. We had a series of seminars and masterclasses, as well as workshops, and the topics, as you can see here, related to business strategy, to an international context, to how specific seminars on the challenge project, as well as some specific workshops to do with this the challenge project. We did something called an immersion, or another way of seeing it as describing it as a site visit. So the students, it was hosted by the City Council. We did a walk of the city, and in doing so could identify and map out the different problems that were in existence, as well as the potential assets that were there to solve the problems. So that was really important. We had a series of tools, and one of the tools that we used was a mapping tool. And as I mentioned, as part of the site visit, we went round and actually mapped the different cultural assets that were in Évry-Courcouronnes. And then as a result of that, that provided a really visual output of the project, and really provided a key mapping source, I guess, for the problems. We used things called scan cards, which are the sort of tools that provide a really visual description of the problem. Something that was really essential to us to support the different projects was to have a way of mapping and identifying an overview of where all the different student teams were at in their progress. So what we could see really clearly at a glance, and we used Trello in this case, was that they were either still doing a specific task, or they handed it in to be assessed. We could then also provide them feedback and resubmit it back to them. So it was a really important part of managing the project for us. which brings me to the last part of the presentation, which is what actually happened, or the end result. And the first challenge project that we did was with, as I mentioned, every Kurkunal. We had 22 students. They were entrepreneurship students. There were 16 concepts presented. 2 were chosen for further development, and in fact, 1 was taken forward by one of the entrepreneurial teams into their company. And so you can see some of the images there of them going through the process of solving it. We did a pitch at the municipality, and so you can see there one of the solutions that the students are actually presenting. There was some fantastic feedback by the students about how they really enjoyed working in the political environment and actually going through the process of creating a live solution. You can see the final pitch presentation photo there. And then just finally, what were the solutions? Well, what we did was we mapped them on an innovation matrix to identify the incremental innovations versus the market innovations, so those that were a little bit more radical. And so we could get a really clear understanding of the different solutions that were offered back to the council, and they were provided also in a written format. Just to finish off, we did 2 other formats. So that was that first one was done in about 3 weeks. This one was done over a semester, and we did 105 students going through an exercise of working together with the regional government, so at a higher level government. And then they'd had to submit insight videos, so we had over 100 videos created as well as written reports. And then the final one was we did in a 2-day event together with French students and Australian students. And that was done on an excursion in Ghent. And again, it just provided a different format to show that this framework could be utilised in multiple ways. And so I guess that's it from me. Just a couple of just to finish off with a couple of lessons learned. The problem framing and problem immersion was really particularly important. The mentors to provide feedback were really important for the project outcome, but also for learning for students. There were the practical workshops really important for advancing the students and supporting them through the work. Having this process management tool, we use Trello, were really essential to making sure it all was easy for the students to follow. Working hard to engage the students by providing local press articles as they came out, and then also just publicising the results. So I guess that's a very quick overview into challenge projects, what we did, and then just some insights at the end. But I'm just going to hand over at this stage to Konstantinos, who's going to be presenting UAB's approach.
Thank you very much, Chad, and thanks for the really thorough explanation of all the different steps. Because I know it had to be like quite a bit dense synthesis there. So I will try to go fast into the. I don't know if you can see my. Can you see?
Konstantinos, I think we haven't been hearing you for quite some time, but now you're back. And also, you are still not in the presenter mode, so you would need
to... Okay, yeah, that's what I was trying to... But now?
There it is.
So, as I was saying, I was thanking Todd for doing the effort to synthesize everything and present the framework and the methodological part. Sarah will enter into more detail into more the challenge-based learning part, the next part. But I will just go really fast, through my presentation and the case study, trying to explain like a different approach on the challenge-based methodology that we did at the UAB. And the intent that we did to set up what we called like an urban lab. In this case, what we had in mind was to set up like a living lab on challenge-based learning and research methodologies that could help us both the university and the local actors and and stakeholders to impulse and solve their problems. So what we did, the case we set up the pilot, we set it up in Sabadell, which is like within the metropolitan region of Barcelona. And it's a city where we have like a small campus, and we were very interested in reactivating the whole area and setting up the process to do that in a co-creative manner. So how we started the whole process was to like, well, identify 4 big ideas. In this case, we had the idea of like innovation, knowledge, and culture coming from our part of the university. We had the concept of like the healthy cities and like healthy habits. The idea of like ecological transition and energetical transition that we're going to be facing in urban challenge. And then the whole idea of like social equity and like social integration. So starting from these big 4 ideas, we were able to define 4 big strategic challenges that we called, and what Todd was mentioning earlier, right? So we were able to define 4 big challenges, very complex and very, let's say, even difficult to approach in the beginning, right? That were like located in the upper part, and challenges that we're aware also that we're not going to be able to solve in just 1 semester, right? But we're going to have to start initiating work. So what we did set up a methodology similar or some like differences from what Todd presented earlier, where we had like certain passes, both for the students, but as well for the sessions we did with the local stakeholders. And it was like very important, for example, like all the solutions that were produced, that we had are like all very well categorized, because that helped us do different things. So let me, for example, explain this diagram. It's kind of like sums up like the main output of the lab. On the left part, you can see like the 4 strategic challenges, even though you cannot read them because it's like a very small diagram that were set up. For each one of these 4 challenges, we did like a separate process to identify and define sub-challenges, right? So for example, it's number 1. First of all, for example, we did like a co-creation session with like local stakeholders. And then from that session, we identified some initial sub-challenges, which on a different session implicated in students here, we started working on this scale, right? From this scale, a series of like project challenges were released, right? And what we did was like through a methodological process, which at the end, I don't think we have time today, but I think it's also one of the points that's very important to keep track of all the workings and processes of the project that are taking place. We were able to define 19 projects, which are like here in the middle, right? And 19 projects, which in reality are both a combination of like all the work, right? And all the ideation that took place between the different stakeholders from the quadruple helix of the local society, but also from the different universities and faculties and programs that participated. And that's important because, as I said, we didn't see this process as something that was going to end once the students were going to like disengage from it, but we're seeing it as a process that we as a university commit to continue, right? Whether it's like with student implication or whether it's like with the local stakeholder collaboration. So we have those 19 projects that at the end, all of them are like interrelated because each one of them responds to different challenges and sub-challenges, but they all at the end are located within the same territory. They implicate to some extent like more or less the same stakeholders, and they all aim for like the same like objectives from a different point of view, right? So how did we do that, right? As I said, from the beginning, we did, the intention was to implicate the whole, the 4 sections of the quadruple helix, and also with a special emphasis on the citizen part, since we are like, did recognize that both the CBL approach, but also the Living Lab approach has like a user-centric focus, and at the end, the end users of any city environment are like the citizens. So you can kind of like see the numbers. Here we can see that we have like people that were like directly participating, or we're like representing associations or departments, or or bigger collectives. So our actual reach could be like conservative estimate to be like 5-folds of that, or like even 10-folds of that. Even that a lot of this process had to be like passed down to like inner workings and inner sessions and all that. And as you can see, that was like a different representations from like cooperative associations to like the local industrial guild, the entrepreneurship association, the local schools, government departments like circular economy networks, local transport company, etc., etc. From the parts of the students, that was a part of the local group that I mentioned, but there was like a whole different group that almost required a whole different participation, where we had like 5 universities participating with 11 different courses, from undergraduates to masters to postgraduates. That implied like 18 professors and experts, and a total of like 227, 230 students in total. And here you can kind of like see the different overview and the like different like specialties that participated. We did see the implication, and we do see the part of the implication of the students as like, the creative input into the whole process, right? We don't see that, as like a cheap labor. We do have like a great like, responsibility in that sense. We do see that, that the students can provide a fresh, creative, and like energetic like approach to like problem solving, and also like engage them to participate, by like this close, let's say, activation in like further processings. And also, as I said, it's also very important to keep track of like the numbers, to make sure we're like also having like, keeping track and are coherent with like philosophy and methodology, making sure we're inclusive, we are like, or opening up the problematic and our views. An example of like the agenda where we had like different meetings, the different presentations from the different schools, kickoff events, closing events. And as I said, principally the first semester, we used it as like a big ideation and like, solution making period. And starting from September, what we did was like this 16 project that I mentioned, we have actually started to impulse like different degrees, all of them, but we're like, I'm very active with like 6, 7 of them, where we have like initiated separate processes that will take their respective time to complete. But also we were able to link like 4 like European programs and link them with the territory and the local stakeholders and continue working on sub-challenges. So we do see that, that its initial phase was like kind of like the setup of the lab and the methodology, but we do, let's say, provision that it will last at least like 3 or 4 years. And we already started having an impact on like all the local media and newspapers and like radios, and people also contacting us on their own and wanting to participate or to ideate. And through the the total of the proposals that we are like impulsing, at the end we were able also to like address 16 of the 17 SDGs, all the SDGs. So I do not, and I cannot actually extend more, but you can find most of the information that I mentioned here on our webpage. And I'm also delighted to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Konstantinos and Todd, for very insightful presentations. Yes, I would like to actually echo Konstantinos and encourage everyone to post your questions either in chat or in Q&A. And in the end, we will be addressing those in a discussion before wrapping up the session. And now it's my pleasure to invite Sara Arco, who works as a researcher at the Institute for Innovation and Development at the University of Ljubljana, to tell us more about the UCityLab teaching toolkit, also another very important output from the project. Sara, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So welcome, everyone. I'll start by a question. So perhaps you know that famous Chinese proverb, tell me and I will forget, show me and I will learn, involve me and I will understand. So it's attributed to Sun Kuang, but please don't count on my pronunciation, who's a Chinese philosopher before Christ. So this was the idea behind the UCityLab teaching and learning program. And the toolkit that I will present today provides the layout, the tools, and the resources to plan and implement such a program. It basically responds to the need for developing and implementing a problem-based hands-on course which will provide the students with the necessary knowledge, skills, and competences to tackle urban challenges through collaborative interdisciplinary research and project work. So the three key dimensions in my vision of the program are problem-based learning. So it's starting from and it's evolving around a real-life urban challenge. Then it's project-based learning. So the students work in small teams on specific team projects. And of course, close cooperation with external city stakeholders, governance, it could be public authorities, relevant societal representatives, or industry partners. So the toolkit provides guidance in particular for university lecturers and study program managers to implement and plan this kind of course. It was developed as an intellectual output within the UCityLab project, and is based on our collaborative analysis of best practice case studies, the literature review, and of course, our own previous experiences. So within the project, we have already used the toolkit as the baseline for implementing 4 very diverse pilot programs at the involved universities. So let's take a look at it in more detail, and I'll share my presentation. Okay. So the UCityLab Challenge Teaching Toolkit. A quick look at what is inside. There's a syllabus outline and template. There's the curriculum with description of modules. There's the assessment chapter, the learning and teaching methods, a chapter on the roles of external stakeholders, a chapter on program administration, and of course, useful resources. This is the quick overview of the concept behind the challenge program. Parts of it were already explained by Todd and Konstantinos, but just to put it in a frame like this. So there were 4 issues that we wanted to address. This is the baseline and framing of the urban challenges, the research methodology, the innovation and design, and the impact part of it. And each of those 4 has an explore and learn component, which could involve lectures and workshops, the experiment and learn component, which are the students' projects, and the intended learning outcomes, so what you know. But let's dive now into what is, in my opinion, the juiciest part of the toolkit, the modules. So based on the concept I presented, we designed 4 modules that explore different parts of what we intended to involve. So the first module explores urban sustainability topics through lectures, workshops, selected readings, and interdisciplinary approaches to urban challenges. The second module equips the students with the research project management methods and techniques for implementing their team projects. Well, the academic mentors can provide lectures and training in research methodology, research design, and so forth. The third module is dedicated to equipping the students with an understanding of the innovation process itself. So, and the necessity of multi-stakeholder engagement and the techniques and tools, of course, they can use to design and implement innovation actions and co-creation activities. And the fourth module, it's dedicated to learning, to allow students to learn how to efficiently communicate their research results to academic and non-academic audiences in particular, so that they can transform their research into action. I think this is really important because science communication skills are rarely integrated in higher education curricula, but nevertheless, they are increasingly an integral part of any job description, be it inside or beyond academic environments. So this last module is intended to progress from designing, developing, and implementing an applied project to creating, assessing, and communicating its impact. So what do you find in the toolkit? The description of each of the learning modules begins with an outline of intended learning outcomes, so the learning objectives. This is divided into theory, into topics, theory or methodology covered by the module, and skills and competences to be obtained within the individual module. Each module content is then briefly described and divided into phases. Just to give you an idea for each of those modules. Then each of these phases is also supplemented with a baseline exemplary reading list and suggested teaching and learning activities that can be implemented within the module. However, this is not all. The toolkit also presents an overview of teaching and learning methods that can be used in such a program. It's focused on problem and project-based learning, which are our baseline, as I mentioned in the beginning. There's also the assessment chapter where we present the approach, the structure, and methods that can be used, blending between formative and summative assessment. There's a chapter on involving external stakeholders, which I think is really important. It identifies their potential roles, the requirements, also how to divide the responsibilities, which parts of the program to involve them into, and also some tips on how to establish and nurture cooperation between the higher education institution and external urban stakeholders. Of course, slightly duller part is the program administration, but do not fret, we have also presented it in engaging format. So we provide some ideas on how this kind of program can be integrated into the university curricula, and also address the specific strengths and weaknesses of each of the integration types. There are also key steps for organizing the program, which can prove helpful. Also to give you a taste of how the final outputs of the implemented program might look like, here are, in addition to the French and Spanish examples, here are some of the ideas developed by the Slovenian students of ethnology and cultural anthropology. I'm going to stop sharing. So the toolkit covers all, well, probably almost all aspects of planning, preparing, organizing, as well as of course, delivering a challenge-based teaching and learning program, in partnership, of course, with external city stakeholders. But nevertheless, for me, one of its biggest strengths is the adaptability of the individual elements. So all chapters include guidelines that show how the program content and activities can be adapted to the individual institutional context. As you were able to see, they were implemented very differently in the two presented examples. So not only in terms of content, in UCityLab, we have also involved a range of students, and this perhaps already answers one of the questions in the Q&A and chat. So we have involved students ranging from entrepreneurship, business to anthropology. So there's no boundaries there. We also provide tips on how to organize the learning process. For instance, intertwining the theoretical and more methodological components of the program's modules together with practical assignments, or just keeping them more separate, because both is possible. There's also tips on how to select urban challenges for the student teams, how to perhaps engage stakeholders in the problem definition already, or maybe involve them later on. So we can have very structured challenges or very loosely identified challenges. So to end, I would say that if you are considering implementing a problem-based hands-on course which tackles urban challenges, we believe that the UCityLab toolkit will come in handy, absolutely. You can find it on the UCityLab project website. It's, of course, open access. And that's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. That was very insightful, and that has already triggered some of our participants, in fact, to start downloading the tool, which is, by the way, available again and can be downloaded because we had small technical issue. So thank you very, very much. That brings me to the next part where Alexandra and I will quickly discuss a few cases that we wanted to present, database here in the Netherlands. And Alexandra, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Baljan. Thank you very much, Sarah, Konstantinos, and Todd for describing your experiences, and Sarah for putting a fantastic presentation in brief on this teaching toolkit. It is much, much larger, of course, and it is very comprehensive. So encourage everybody to take a look at that when the issue on our website is resolved. But I just want to mention that what Sarah just said right now, that the adaptability of this teaching toolkit is the most important element of it, and you can already see that through Todd's and Konstantinos's presentation on their cases. However, of course, a lot of work has gone into developing that teaching toolkit, and a lot of research has been done to identify those elements that could later on be adjusted, and how to make it adaptable for different context in different institutions as well. So I would like to briefly mention that during that research that we did for a UCityLab project, we also connected with different like-minded initiatives and like-minded organizations that created different challenge-based learning programs, courses, curricula and not curricula, formal, non-formal activities. And we did collect a lot of different cases that could also serve for you as an inspiration to use our toolkit later on, but also get inspired by the others who probably undertook their urban challenges activities slightly differently. And I want to just bring about 2 examples, and first of all, of course, tell you a little bit more about our case study collection. I hope you can see my screen. We have collected 27 cases.
Alexandra,
yes,
it's in the presenter mode.
Sorry, it's good.
A little bit crooked, but yeah, we don't see it in full.
Interesting. Let me.
Yeah, there it is. Now it works.
Yes, perfect. So just to mention once again, we have collected 27 good cases on urban challenges, programs and initiatives between universities and municipalities and other social stakeholders across Europe. And we have actually identified a number of activities that have been done, and Todd already discussed a little bit earlier that different types of activities undertaken in their initiatives as well as we identified different levels of these initiatives, different supporting mechanisms for these initiatives, and of course, curriculum engagement. Why am I telling you this? Because there would be a lot of different examples on our website where you can probably see that some of these examples are better connected with your context, and you can also learn a lot from them. What we have learned actually while collecting these case studies, analyzing them, as well as, of course, doing our research, that the alignment in regional and institutional practices is necessary for successful university cooperation, but I think that is a given. That's what we all understand, that the commitment of different stakeholders is a given, and that's also what we observed in our case studies, that the student learning experiences are the major motivation that is shown in a lot of our cases as well, and especially in the ones that I'm going to show you in a couple of minutes. But at the same time, we have, of course, learned that there needs to be more flexibility for the curriculum to undertake those challenge-based learning programs. But that's where our teaching toolkit comes in handy as well, because we do try to integrate a different mode of delivery there, and also explain how to do that better. And we've learned that the people is the factor. So all of you here who are now on this webinar, you're probably the people who would be driving those challenge-based learning programs. And we believe that by learning from us, also from the examples from the others, through these case studies, we will be able to achieve the goal of today, and to connect the universities better with the societies for the current difficult times. I want to highlight two examples from the Netherlands that are slightly different from how Todd and Konstantinos undertook their challenge programs. One is 20 Creathon. It is not your typical hackathon, I would say, because it's been running for quite a long time already, and it involves a lot of stakeholders. So University of Twente and Saxion University of Applied Sciences have put together a great program of several years where they undertake various events with different stakeholders, but they're hugely supported by the government. So it took quite some time actually to get this support from the local government and to drive this collaboration. But the major success factor is actually the fact that people there connected with the local government. And these events specifically focus on the social implications of digital technology in the Overijssel province. That's where Twente is located. And there are plenty of examples. Actually, this is one of the examples from the case studies. You can read it in full on our website as well. But there have been more than 10 applicable solutions developed in several years, mostly on food waste and local food, water stress, safety, different events, facial recognitions for events as well. And the impact is quite noticeable for all of the stakeholders involved. An interesting solution developed specifically for facial recognition was the app for the events to make it easier for people to join different events through their LinkedIn profiles, and how to ensure safety there as well. So I suggest that you check out this specific case on our website as well, where you can learn about the barriers that they had. Of course, there were a lot of challenges, but more success factors actually. And another quite different example is the Amstel House Living Lab. This is not a typical challenge-based learning program or a course. It's actually a separate research initiatives where a lot of different smaller student projects are undertaken. This initiative is between the University of Applied Sciences of Amsterdam and Amstel House. This is a residential community senior house. And what's happening is that the students actively participate in the lives of the senior residents, identify the problems, the challenges there, form the teams, and actually work on those throughout the semester. There are a lot of different ongoing projects, but it's already noticeable that there have been a great improvement in the social environment at the Amstel House residence house themselves. So the social network of the residents has improved because the students are interacting with them, not only developing solutions for the problems, but also interacting with them on daily basis. So that brings the two different generations together. And there have been a lot of tools and applications developed for the well-being of the residents. One interesting tool was connected with the risk of falling, that the residents could use an app and that could prevent from the fall. I would also suggest that whomever is interested, check out this full case study on our website, and I will also link the website of Amstel House, where you can learn more about this type of cooperation, because this is not a multi-stakeholder cooperation, but it does involve the municipality to some extent, and it does involve the social actor, and it's more one-on-one cooperation, but it's very impactful and has already shown a lot of potential and a very interesting mode to undertake your challenge-based learning programs. That would be it from me, and at the same time, I also would like to showcase another example, but more to hear from the educator, not from the Netherlands, but our own Baljan Orazbaeva, who has also undertaken a challenge-based slash problem-based course herself, and would like to hear your experiences that would add to Todd's and Konstantino's experiences too.
Thank you very much, Alexandra, also for your insights from the Netherlands. Yeah, in fact, I am also an educator, and I would like to bring a small example of a social design thinking course that has been designed as part of a business school at Münster University of Applied Sciences, where I have been teaching for the 5 years. And I've been basically tasked with the responsibility of business by our business school to create a smaller course. So I cannot really compare it to what Konstantinos or Todd have done, because that was really sort of a trial test for our business school to shift our focus from SMEs, which is very typical for universities of applied sciences in Germany, towards more societal stakeholders. And in fact, it was a very fun process for me to undergo, because I had 2 years to develop and to trial a course. And what we did is that we decided to take a very extensive period of time for really assessing the needs of the region in Münster and Münsterland. So this is what I guess can also partially differentiate my project from the others, is because I spent at least 6 months with a small team interviewing stakeholders in the region on what their needs might be, and how the students specifically in our business school can help them in tackling those challenges, also involving municipality. But in a majority of cases, I would say that we were actually working with social enterprises, with non-governmental organizations, and some municipality institutions as well. And when we were preparing this event today, I guess it was very, very clear that I was invited to really tell what were the challenges that I have had during the process, and also how I could overcome them, because I also see these questions coming in both in chat as well as in the Q&A. And what I can really tell from my side is that whilst I was developing this course using this design thinking methodology for actually educating the students and actually creating those solutions to the challenges, we also utilized the design thinking methodology to emphasize with our environment in Münster. And I think that was very, very helpful. So really taking time to understand the needs and the challenges, because very often, as Todd has mentioned during his presentation, the problem definition takes a lot of time. And what we decided to do is to actually take this into our own hands and then guide the students throughout the process, where they would really sort of, make these problems even smaller for themselves, so that they will be able to solve them in the scope of the project that we will be running as part of the social design thinking course. Another thing that I also wanted to emphasize, because I saw that coming up quite a bit also in chat, is that how to ensure multidisciplinarity when you would like to involve students from different faculties. In fact, in a German institution, in the German State University of Applied Sciences, it is quite a difficult process, and it requires time. And what I would suggest to all of the educators here is to actually start this process as soon as possible, because it can take up to 1 semester of just negotiating. At least that was my experience on how I can bring some other students on board as well. And it is all about basically translating our credits to the credits that could be then included into the curricula in other faculties. So the universities of applied sciences in Germany, they have the autonomy to operate the way they want, and that also applies to the faculties. Therefore, oftentimes you really sort of have to make sure that there is enough time and there is enough space to negotiate with other faculties to also make sure that the students can get everything out of it, also in terms of the credits that they can get. And another thing that I also have clearly learned for myself, at least, is to when talking to stakeholders and trying to involve them into the process, and now I'm talking about external organizations, is to have very clearly your value proposition defined. So what is it that you are really trying to solve, and what is it that you're really trying to bring as a benefit to these organizations? And having a slide deck, having a small video, or having a very well-prepared pitch is definitely very helpful. And of course, you would need to speak the language of the person that you are talking to, because quite obviously, when you're talking to a social enterprise, it's oftentimes very easy to actually get them on board, whereas within a municipality, you would need to have very clearly defined a pathway on how you can actually get some of those challenges that they think may have, but also help them to really define those challenges together, and to have that everything ready as a pack that you can use as a value really proposition that to get those people on board. And that, I think, would be it from my side. But what I will do also is that I will drop a link to a small video about this course. And without further ado, now that I talk, I would actually like to invite all of our speakers today to join me and to answer some of the questions that haven't been answered yet. In fact, I have a few questions on my own. So I was also wondering how, Konstantinos, you, for example, were able to get so many different stakeholders on board. How much time did it take? Were you doing this on your own, or have you been involving some other people from the team into the process? Because I think it's very important to sort of have a unified approach, or actually the other way around, to have a very tailored approach to different stakeholders when you're trying to get them on board.
Yes, I think here the question of like scaling up both the challenge, right, and the associated local interest group, let's say, is vital, right? Both for in order to be able to frame well the question, but also in order to be able to have like a manageable group that you can deal with during the execution process, right? So in our case, true that we had a relationship with the city of Sabadell before the start of the program, right? Because we had been participating with them in different, let's say, research programs that they had, and we would be participating as part of the local interest group in that respective program. So, for example, we had the president of like 3-4 participations in such programs, but that had like permitted us to already identify like some initial challenges, some initial potential stakeholders, start talking to them, before we already had a pilot and see what they were doing. So, I mean, that was part of our work. I think in that case, and it depends on the university or on the context or stuff like that, it always helps to have people that can dedicate, part of their job, or part of the work, or ideally, like do that, like almost like, let's say, dedicate doing that to work with local stakeholders to be, like vigilant and open to like detect challenges in their like local territory and so on. So for us, intense work really was like a semester, but the actual, let's say, background behind the pilot, I would say, would go at least like 2-3 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
But maybe the first 2-3 years were not that intentional. It was more like a work that we were doing to like try to like put the seeds and start working with the stakeholders.
Mm-hmm.
And then the pilot was like, let's say, the excuse and the point where we were like, okay, now we can do something together after we've got to know each other and worked on some points. And I think just also trying to complement a question that also raised up, I think here the key question, if you want to like, engage so many people and also with like many different interests, is to find a common point or many common points, parallel common points where each one of them can find an interest to participate. That means that, you will not waste their time for a semester, like just burdening them with students, asking them questions all the time, saying, no, it's not just going to be like that. At the end of the semester, they will be able to get something back, whether it's like a, initial proposal, a guidebook, like some like brainstorming, a prototype, whatever. But they will have something tangible at the end of that semester that will be like, okay, that was worth doing it, because we also learned as part of like intellectual learning, but we also got some tangible results into it. So I think those leverage points need to be well considered when one is setting up these labs, right? So there will be enough leverage points to be able to keep it going, but also get it initiated, and points where they can keep people engaged and motivated to keep going on throughout the process, even if it was like with different points and different degrees of dedication throughout the process. So, and again, responding, since it was like a big project it was a big collaborative project. We did have a person, Marta, which is not here with us today, but she was like collaborating with us for part of the project, mostly on the pilot implementation, and then different areas of the university. And there was like a lot of people there that were also collaborating, like in different degrees and at different points.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much. I think it was very insightful for everyone. I think oftentimes it's just very complex environment that we're operating in. And when we're talking about multi-stakeholder collaboration, how to organize those processes, for one exactly purpose of actually making the city life better and also educating the students. So yeah, I think it was definitely very helpful. Sarah, I had one question for you. Because you were talking quite a bit today about this toolkit that has been developed, and I know it must have been a very big effort to actually put those things together. But what I was wondering, do you have 2 or 3 tips for our listeners here on what they can do to start with this toolkit? Where should they start focusing on when, let's say, today they have downloaded it? So where should the focus be?
Well, yeah, that's a tough question. Well, I would think first about what are our objectives at the organization I'm working at, or the university, or another institution where we're trying to design a challenge-based program. So what are our objectives? Who are our students? What do we want them to learn? This would be where I would start by really bringing in all the information that we already do have and what we want to do. And then it's the road between the 2 points that has to be designed. Secondly, I would consider who are the stakeholders that we're already engaged with, because you don't have to start big, like Konstantinos, for instance, presented today. You can start small. So in our first semester pilot, we involved 2 or 3 external stakeholders that we had previous relationship with, that we had a certain level of trust already established among us, and we started to build up from there. Also in terms of bringing this interdisciplinarity in the program or course, you can also start by little things. For instance, in the first semester, we organized a one-day workshop where we brought together students of anthropology and students of electrical engineering, and they were working on some kind of really quick design project ideas. And the anthropology students showed them what kind of methods we use in anthropology, and the electrical engineering and media students tried to work with that qualitative material that can be gathered by such research methods. So it was not an integrated interdisciplinary approach, but it was a taste of how these different kinds of knowledge, different kinds of methods can be brought together and used in a project like this. And then, of course, this can evolve. For instance, in the second semester, we had a 1-week co-design and co-research in cooperation with another university from Austria, and we brought in students of design. So then they were trying to interpret the research results and the project ideas in visual formats. So both of the student groups were able to learn from each other. And I think this has already brought something new, a new dimension into the program. Yeah.
That is definitely a very good point. I think Todd has already briefly touched upon this today when presenting different formats. And this is, I think, also what we could clearly pass as a message to the audience, that there are many multiple different ways on how these things can be started. Start small if it is difficult at the beginning, even in terms of getting stakeholders on board and developing multidisciplinarity. In any case, I was also actually wondering what were exactly the formats that you were mostly utilizing. Konstantinos, maybe back to you. So we heard about block delivery, we heard about hackathons, we heard about design sprints, organizing different events with guest speakers. So what were the formats that have been working very well in your environment?
In our case, what we did for practical reasons, but also for our own sake, the way that we engaged the students was like through certain courses, right? So the idea was like, for example, we identified in faculty of psychology, social psychology, there was like a certain course that was like they call it like, well, it was like they had a similar approach to challenge-based, but it wasn't like challenge-based, it was like more like problem-based solving. They called it learning and service and social service. So what they do is like social projects, always like implicating students. So I think what we did was like internally at the UAB identify 7 or 8 courses that we already had like a compatible approach, right? So we got in contact with them and we started explaining them the project. And at the end, 5 or 6 of them decided to go ahead because they saw the added value that would add to the thing. And then we also did a similar approach with like, say, other universities and programs that we had, but always through a regulated, let's say, process that would somehow secure us that the students wouldn't be like engaged throughout the whole process, right? So, because first of all, they would have to like qualify with, let's say, the requirements of the course in order to be able to pass and get a grade and all that. But at the same time, they would have to like, while doing all that, let's say, regulatory work, they would also be staying engaged with the challenge and also like submitting a work that would be of quality, right? But at the same time, we also did like other events, as I said, where we had the stakeholders and the students from different universities and faculties working together on the challenges and getting together. That did get harder once the whole thing went, online. So that we had to adapt that and make that maybe smaller so it would like be easier. And then the presentations that the students did, we did open them up, but we did have to scale down the processes once the COVID came. So I think with everything, we did like a mixed format, right? But the main engagement of the students was like through courses, whether it was like undergraduate or master or postgraduate.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. That actually brings me to the next question. And I'm not sure whether Rui is here or not, but I think it can also easily apply to both Sarah and Konstantinos. But I see Rui has unmuted.
I'm here, yep.
Hi, Rui. Good to
Hey.
have you back. The question that we were all also wondering about now, discussing different formats of delivery, is how is it now for you to deliver this challenge-based education in an online format that now we are all faced with unexpectedly, but already for 1 year. So if you have any insights or tips maybe that you could share with the audience, that would be great.
Yeah, well, we need to get creative, and I would actually analyze the past year, because we had to migrate, well, exactly a year ago, and I would divide that in two steps. A first approach was do whatever it takes approach. So you just try to understand the tools available. And start using them. Okay, we knew about Zoom for a long time. We knew about Teams for a long time. We were using that for communication, not so much for collaboration. And so the first moment was to get acquainted with the tools, understand the tools, and suddenly you start realizing that there are tools out there that can really enhance this collaboration and engagement. So the second moment is when you suddenly understand that this is no longer a plan B. It can become a plan A. So you start using tools, a mixture of tools. For instance, for project-based approach or challenge-based projects, we've been using a lot Mural. And Mural has been, it allows you to do something that people thought it was not possible, to run design thinking based projects. And you know that on design thinking, you use and abuse of post-its and so on. It's very iterative and people get really close, and you do it on Mural. And it's exactly the same almost physical approach. And then, and suddenly you understand that, yeah, we can do this, for instance, from the collaboration part, or using something so simple in Zoom, like the breakout rooms, when we can get people in small groups to work together to discuss and then come back, as we always did in our physical classrooms, or to use the poll tool of Zoom. I'm talking about things that exist on Zoom that suddenly we realize that we can use to enhance this collaboration, to bring the social experience of learning into the equation. So I think I'll give you an example. Now, some of our programs that were project-based will be delivered by default also online. We are at the stage where we trust the process, and the process really adapts and it's positive. And by the way, let's also be honest here. We were understanding and we were seeing that movement happening, because first, more and more we had project teams where students were spread all over the world. I was when I was at Porto Design Factory, I was the coordinator of a program where all our innovation teams were half of them in Porto, half of them somewhere in the world. So collaboration was already happening remotely, but also these issues about the future of work, the digital nomads, the remote workers, these were already on the table a few years ago, not only now. So it is in some sense, and I do believe that this is very important for the project-based approach, and this was mentioned throughout the presentations of our colleagues, that these projects become flight simulators of real life. And real life, very often you have teams that are spread all over the world that you need to collaborate with. And so the classroom, even if it is the online, and by the way, the challenge now, the third step will be a phygital, when you suddenly have students in classroom and you have some of them online, and it becomes hybrid, it becomes liquid, as I prefer to call it. That's the next step, where you start combining the physical and the digital environments within a learning atmosphere and a project-based learning atmosphere. Flight simulators of real life, this enhances the learning experience. It's not better or worse, it's different. Okay.
I agree. Thank you. Thank you very much, Rui, for your insights. I think we were all of a sudden confronted with this new reality, but if life gives you lemons, then make a lemonade. And I think this is what educators all across the globe actually managed to do quite beautifully. But I am also quite curious now how the hybrid form would actually work, because to be honest, I think it is another challenge that we would all need to tackle in the future. In any case, I think that brings me to the end of our event, and I would really like to thank you all for your wonderful contributions, and also to congratulate you on a wonderful work that you've done over the past few years, developing such a neat approach to challenge-based education with involvement of so many different stakeholders. I think this only emphasizes the role of universities in our societies even more. So thank you all very, very much. I see now that there is a question of what would happen with UCityLab in the future. Well, in fact, what I can say, at least from UIN side, is that there are a few more initiatives that are being developed in this area. So please stay tuned on our website. I'm pretty sure that our partners here are also developing some new exciting initiatives as well. But the website would still be functioning, so I guess we will be updating you on further developments. Otherwise, thanks again for tuning in today. As it has been posted in chat, the recording as well as the presentations will be made available on UCityLab website, so feel free to share those findings with your colleagues as well. And that would be it from our side. Thanks so much. It has been a pleasure to host this event on behalf of UIN. Everyone have a great day, and thanks again to our wonderful speakers today. Have a great day. Bye-bye.